Hey friends and book lovers, welcome. Today's video is the mid-year freakout tag, and I think I'm a little late on this one. I've seen everyone's tag videos go up so far and they have seemed so fun, and some of those have been really interesting and put a few more books on my TBR than I anticipated. But I thought I would go through all the books that I've read this year, what I loved, what I didn't love, what I'm anticipating, what I'm looking forward to, what I have to finish, and give y'all my answers based on these questions on the mid-year freakout tag. Now, the first question is the best book that you've read so far this year, and this one was hard to pick, but I think probably the most interesting and I don't know. I had high expectations for this book, but I feel like it was still so good. And I actually have a gush review on it, and that would be The Ninth Rain by Jen Williams. I still have to read Bitter Twins and Poison Song, but honestly, this was such a good story, and it was so different from any fantasy book that I've ever read so far. It wove different elements that other books had, but in a very unique way. The writing style was really interesting. You don't really know what's going on in this world until about chapter 4, and I really did enjoy not knowing in this book, but it's really good. Highly recommend, if you haven't read this, to take a read and see if you like this style, because I personally loved it. All right, number 2 is the best sequel that you've read so far this year. This one was a little hard because there's 2 books. One is one that I personally love. I love the characters, I love the story, and I'm in love with it, even though it can be a very polarizing book. And the second one is one that is just really well done. The trilogy was really well done. This sequel or final in the series is really well woven. Everything comes together. Every loose end is kind of tied up for the most part, but then at the end, it still gives a little bit of leeway for maybe another trilogy to happen if she wanted another trilogy to happen, which I really appreciate, but I still feel very satisfied by the ending. So that book, the one that I think is really well woven and part of a trilogy, was Empire of Gold. I read this recently in June and I thought it was just super well done. I didn't think I was gonna like the ending as much as I did, but I actually really liked the ending. It was very much my preference of things not being perfect, but things and loose ends having been tied and having been explained, so I really enjoyed that. This is a great trilogy and it is definitely well worth the hype, so I would highly recommend, if you're interested in Middle Eastern desert fantasies, that you pick this one up, because it is super good and it's refreshing towards the other kinds of magic that I've seen, because I don't usually see a lot of djinn magic in books these days. So this one was really great, and I hope to see more of this kind of magic come to the fantasy genre. The next one, and of course I can't go through a mid-year freakout tag and not talk about this being a really good and favorite book of mine, and that is A Court of Silver Flames. Technically this is a sequel to the trilogy, so I'm including it here, but I really did enjoy this. Love Cassian, love Nesta. I love the way this was written. It wasn't super plot filling, but I wasn't expecting that. I was really expecting the focus to be on Cassian and Nesta's relationship. It was really good. I really enjoyed it. The ending wrapped up a little too quickly for me, but overall, the amount of love that I had for this book, I just gave it a 5 stars, despite the fact that it does have some problems, but really good. If you like Sarah J. Maas's original trilogy, I would give this one a shot. There's a lot of different polarizing opinions, like I said before, about this book, but I'm on the side of really enjoying it. I thought it was great. It gave me exactly what I wanted it to, and that's all I could expect from this book. So the third question is a new release that you haven't read but you really want to, and for me that's Mask of Mirrors. The amount of times that I've told myself, okay, this is the week that I'm gonna finally pick this up and read it, especially because I've heard everyone loves it. I haven't actually heard one bad review for Mask of Mirrors. I haven't heard one person say a bad thing about this book. And so obviously that intrigues me, because I'm I wonder if I'm gonna feel the same way. And the sequel to this comes out in December, which is less than a year after this is released. It's a sequel, and the cover for that sequel is just as beautiful as this one. I don't know if it's a duology or a series or a trilogy. I want to get to this maybe in the second half of the year, so that way it's still fresh in my mind when I have the sequel that comes out in December, which I am very much anticipating. Again, I've heard nothing but amazing things and I really want to read it. This one is supposed to have political intrigue, a lot of royal courts, a lot of nobility, very much masquerades are obviously involved, which makes sense, and that's all I know about it. I don't know too much but I do enjoy political intrigue, and I don't think that this one is slow to the point where the political intrigue would bore me. So I am very much looking forward to it, and again, I have not heard a bad thing about this book, so very highly anticipating this and hoping that it is a 5-star read for me. So the fourth book is a book that you're anticipating for the second half of the year, and right now, because I still have some first in series books to read, of which their sequels are coming out in the second half of 2021. 2 of them, including Mask of Mirrors, that I really want to read this year so that I can see if I'm going to really want their sequels. So I can't comment there. So for this one, I put A Shadow in Ember by Jennifer L. Armentrout, which is the spin-off series to From Blood and Ash. And this goes in the backstory of one of the gods and his consort and talks about that a lot, which I'm very interested in because in the third book of the From Blood and Ash series, we got a very small taste of the gods and their relationships and how they deal with mortals. And so this one I think is going to show us a lot more about the rules around how the gods just go about their life, how they interact with mortals more, what the past was, why maybe they're behaving the way that they're behaving in the world now. So I'm very much anticipating that one. I've pre-ordered it and I can't wait to get to it as soon as it comes out because I think it'll be really good and really interesting. This will also tell me if I want to continue on with the series because you'll see. I wasn't a fan of one of the books, so that was disappointing. And the fifth question actually goes right into it. The most disappointing book that you've read this year, and that does happen to be in the From Blood and Ash series. So that would be the third one, The Crown of Gilded Bones, which came out in April. I was so looking forward to this book, especially after really loving the second one, Kingdom of Flesh and Fire. Loved that book. It was my favorite so far in the series, and I was thinking this one's probably going to be really high up there with that one, and it fell really flat. The beginning is good, the ending is good, and the middle is just flat. It's kind of boring, it's redundant, repetitive, that the same conversations happen over and over again, the same jokes happen over and over again, and I was just so disappointed because the other 2 books have been so amazing. And Shadow and Ember comes out this fall, so I'm hoping that that doesn't have the pitfalls that this one did. Otherwise, I'm not sure that I'll continue with this series. But the first 2 in From Blood and Ash are really fun, really enjoyable if you like fantasy romance. This one was definitely really disappointing, and I was just so sad that it was so disappointing, and it took me longer to read it because I was kind of bored halfway through it. I'm glad I prevailed because the ending is really good and we finally get somewhere, but I think a lot of parts in the middle should have been shortened and some parts at the end could have been lengthened to explain more. Just a personal opinion, but really wasn't a huge fan of this one. The 6th question is the biggest surprise of this year, and I'm gonna have to say Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson. Everyone loves Brandon Sanderson. He is one of the most popular fantasy authors anywhere. On Booktube, off of Booktube, just anywhere, Brandon Sanderson is almost like a household name if you like to read fantasy. So I had heard of Brandon Sanderson way before I had ever heard of Booktube, and I heard of him again in the last year, especially after joining Booktube and watching Booktube. So I was anticipating this to be kind of more of a dense read because typically I find that fantasy authors, especially like ones that write epic fantasy series, their series and their books tend to be very densely written. But I was very surprised by how digestible and easy to read and accessible this story was and this book was, and it really made me want to read more of his books because of this one. So this one was really great. I think I gave it like a 5 stars. I was surprised by this book because I didn't expect to love it so much and to love Brandon Sanderson's writing so much. So that was a great surprise for me. So number 7 is my favorite new author, and for this one, it was a no-brainer. Definitely Elizabeth Acevedo. She is genius. She writes contemporary, so not a fantasy author, but I read 2 of her books in June and I fell in love with her audiobooks. And I am not an audiobook person. I much prefer to physically read. I feel like I can absorb the story more when I physically read, and I do find reading at least fantasy books on audio is really hard for me to digest everything that goes on. But physically reading or reading on a Kindle, ebook, whatever, that's a lot easier for me when I'm reading an actual story. I like to do audiobooks for nonfiction, for lecture, podcast type books, but her narrations are so compelling and so amazing. Poet X is amazing, With the Fire and High is amazing, and the next book that I'd like to read is Clap When You Land, which is also supposed to be amazing and written in verse, and I didn't know how much I love books that were written in verse until Elizabeth Acevedo, but every time that she has a book, I'm going to definitely buy it, and if it's on audio, I'm definitely going to buy audio, because her on audio is just, it's amazing, and I highly recommend her to anyone that hasn't listened to her audiobooks. they are top notch. So the next question is newest fictional crush. And even though Crown of Gilded Bones was disappointing, my newest fictional crush this year is probably Castile from the From Blood and Ash series. I only read that series this year, so I only knew about Castile this year, but I would say Castile and probably Kieran, because they're both just, yeah, they're both really fun. So I probably would say those two are definitely my favorite two new fictional crushes, and we're just gonna keep it moving because I really hope that this next book is good so that I can continue with the series, because I'm gonna miss reading about those two characters if it's not. The ninth question was kind of tough because I'm between two characters, and the ninth question is your newest favorite character. So the first one that popped up in my mind was Bryce from Crescent City. I loved her because she was so relatable. Definitely someone that I was a few years ago, and I loved just her tenacity and her slyness. Just everything about her as a character makes her one of my favorite heroines when it comes to any of Moss books. But then I read the City of Brass trilogy, and I really loved Nari in the City of Brass, and I found her to be a really amazing kind of relatable character. She's not a hero or a villain, but we're all kind of rooting for her. Even when I didn't know what or who to root for, I was always rooting for Nari. So really love those two female characters. I feel like they're very strong female characters. Nari is from Cairo, Bryce is from like a mythical urban fantasy city that kind of reminds me of like New York, Chicago type of city, but both really strong, fantastic heroines, protagonists, whatever you'd like to call them, and yeah, really enjoyed those two. The next one is a book that made you happy, and I took this question as a book that is kind of happy and wholesome, and for this one I chose Amari and the Night Brothers. This is middle grade. It is very cute. It is about a girl who goes on a quest to find her lost brother and discovers this whole magical world, and she's also kind of like amazing and strong and badass in this world. I really love this. I can't recommend this enough for anyone who likes to read middle grade or any young adult or young child that wants to read middle grade. This is so wholesome and happy and cute, but also really imaginative and sweet and emotional, and there's a lot of social aspects that are, you know, coming into light in this. So it's a very realistic novel in that sense because it doesn't gloss over issues that we have in our society, but at the same time it's really cute and wholesome and really well done, and it just made me happy to read it. It made me happy the way it ended. It made me happy when I was reading it. I was really invested in the character, in Amari and her friends and the story, and it was just super cute and made me so happy reading it. And I can't recommend this enough. It's actually really worth it, and I'm very happy that I read it. The 12th question is the most beautiful book that I've bought this year, and actually this book hasn't even come in the mail, but I'm gonna say Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. I had to look that up because I couldn't remember who the author was. But I got the UK cover, which is why I think it's super beautiful. I don't love the US cover very much, but the UK cover I think is absolutely stunning, and I think it's also foiled, which I'm really hoping that it's foiled, because if it's foiled, it's gonna be just as stunning as I'm imagining. I find a lot of the times the UK cover for books are usually much more beautiful than the US covers. It's very rare that I like a US cover over a UK cover, but it has happened a couple times, and in this case the UK cover for Ariadne is absolutely gorgeous. I freaking love it. The last question concluding this tag is, what books do you need to read by the end of the year? And ooh, let me tell you, I have a list. I need to finish the Mistborn Era 1 trilogy. I have read The Final Empire, and that was amazing, and this month I'm reading The Well of Ascension with Andrew over at Get Right On In. I put that in my July TBR. If you haven't watched my July TBR yet, you should definitely watch it. That's on there. And I'm also gonna just finish that trilogy because I really need to. The second is also a series. It's a quartet. It is The Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne, because everyone tells me that Valor is so good and Ruin just ruins you and Wrath is just another ride, and I just really want to read the rest of it. So those two series I really have to read this year because it's high time. I think I'm gonna love them. I think they're gonna be 5-star series for me. I think they're gonna be favorite series of mine once I finish them. John Gwynne's writing is one of my favorite writing styles I've discovered so far. It's just amazing, and I really enjoyed Brandon Sanderson's story so far, so I feel like I'm just gonna enjoy the rest of that trilogy. Very excited. And then I'm just gonna pop this one in because we talked about it earlier and I haven't read it and I need to read it by the end of the year because its sequel is coming out, and that's Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick, which is 2 authors, if I haven't mentioned that, is an author duo. I really need to read this by the end of the year because everyone's read it, everyone's loved it, and the sequel's coming out in December, and I want to read that when everyone else reads it because I know that there's going to be a buddy read for that. So we're gonna have to read this probably in the next couple months because the more I talk about it, especially on this channel, the more I just want to read it. And also the cover is really stunning. Yeah, this is definitely one on the list. So that's it for this tag, guys. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you can relate to some of it. If you've read some of these books and you hated them or loved them or want to let me know how you felt about them, please leave that in the comments down below. And if you have anything else to add, any books that you loved or didn't love this year, any disappointments or surprises, let me know how you're doing with your reading so far in 2021. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. That really does help my channel. And if you like this content and you want to see more from me, please don't hesitate to subscribe.